3 years ago, Trump's hand-picked Supreme Court justices voted to overturn Roe v. Wade, the landmark case that enshrined the right to choose for every woman in America. Overnight, Trump's Supreme Court justices ripped away reproductive rights from millions and put the lives of pregnant women at risk because of radical restrictions passed by Republican-controlled legislatures. The overturning of Roe v. Wade meant that daughters had fewer rights than their mothers and grandmothers had. In 19 states, abortion is banned. On the campaign trail, Trump bragged about how he was the president who ended a nationwide right to abortion.
And so the women thing, I did a great thing long term, and I think they'll understand, on the Roe v. Wade. I did a great thing.
It's an all-out attack. And Trump's recently passed billionaire first budget bill cuts nearly $1 billion from Medicaid, hurting healthcare providers in low-income and rural areas. And after Trump campaigned on a promise to make in vitro fertilization, or IVF, more accessible and affordable, after he even weirdly called himself the father of IVF at a rally, now he's breaking his promise to make IVF free. And anti-choice groups are declaring victory, saying that they lobbied Trump against IVF and are winning. Trump's record on reproductive health is awful. Trump would sign a nationwide abortion ban, and his budget already massively defunded essential health providers like Planned Parenthood. So, to help us break down what Trump's agenda means for families and for voters who rank healthcare as a top issue, we're proud to be joined today by the president of Planned Parenthood, Alexis McGill Johnson. I'm Hannah Muldaven, Deputy Communications Director for the Democrats, and your host for today. It's Monday, August 18th, and this is the Democrats' Daily Blueprint. President McGill Johnson, or Alexis, welcome to the Daily Blueprint. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, in early 2024, IVF came under threat with clinics halting treatments in Alabama, forcing Trump to make promises he knew he couldn't keep, including making access to IVF free. To no one's surprise, I don't think to your or my surprise, the self-proclaimed fertilization president, which is just weird, broke his promise. So what should people know about the scope and scale of Trump and Republicans' attacks on reproductive health care? And why is no one surprised that he broke this promise?
You know, let's just go back for a second in 2024 and remember what that must have felt like for families who invested time and considerable resources and a lot of hopes and dreams in their kind of IVF journey. It is not a small undertaking by any means. And to have the threats of not being able to get their actual embryo transfers, not being able to get them transferred out of state for fear of how all of these kinds of the impact of all of these lawsuits, up into including the abortion bans and laws are impacting kind of the state of reproductive freedom and healthcare. Look, I mean, this president who, very creepily called himself the father of IVF, after reeling in women voters with a campaign promise, I feel like he's once again pulling a bait and switch, right? He told voters that the government would actually pay for IVF treatment and mandate that insurers cover it. And, he also said he was going to leave abortion rights to the states. And, candidate Trump said that he was going to be a protector of women. We know that every single line of that was just lip service. And in the 8 months that he's been in office, rather than expand access to reproductive care so that women and families can, make decisions about whether, when, or how they're going to start their families, we've only seen this administration take measures to do anything but, right? Whether that is defund Planned Parenthood, which happened in this last big bad betrayal of a bill, withhold funding from Title X because of our DEI policies, which was one of his first acts, attacking gender affirming care and trans rights, really eroding EMTALA, which should protect every, pregnant patient going into an emergency room, that if they in fact need an abortion, they can get one. And then also he let out a bunch of the most extreme opposition members who engage in violence against providers and health centers and clinics. And he pardoned those violators, essentially signing off on a harassment and, more violence against providers and patients. And so I could go on and on. I'm like they're going to burn $10 million worth of contraception, globally from USAID. There's just so much. So I think what the voters should know is that he has been talking out of both sides of the neck, and that we cannot trust a word that is coming out of his mouth, even if he pretends to be a fighter for women. All of his policies are actually showing us something totally different.
Yeah, and I think with Donald Trump, that's not surprising. But when it comes to items that Planned Parenthood really cares about and fights for every day, and that the Democratic Party stands for, it's atrocious. And, it's a number of Trump voters, you talked about him lying to them, but a number of them said that his promises to expand access to IVF and leave abortion to the states was a reason that they voted for him. Promises we now know aren't going to be kept. So what are you hearing from women and families who are impacted by this bait and switch? We always talk about the impact on sort of real people. We know the impact that this will have on families. What are you hearing from your position?
Well, look, I've been hearing from across the board, right? I mean, at Planned Parenthood, we are a nonpartisan organization. We, every time you see a ballot for reproductive freedom or reproductive freedom on the ballot, it gets wide support across party and across demographics and constituents, because people understand how reproductive freedom has impacted their lives. And I think on IVF, it is such a personal journey. I've so many friends who have been on this journey. Just really countless. We all know someone who is, who may have been trying to conceive or been having challenges to conceive and using IVF. And so I heard people when he talked about IVF, making IVF more accessible, knowing everything else they knew about him and how horrible the first term was with him, still pausing for a second to say, wow, he really got me in my heartstrings. Should I believe this? And wanting to believe it, because again, it was a very personal piece. And, we know that the personal always animates the political. But, even though, he promised all of these things, people are now seeing how much he is backtracking that. And, I've heard not only about the impact on IVF, we now have patients who are worried they're no longer going to be able to access birth control or STI testing and treatment. They're not going to be able to get care at Planned Parenthood because of all of the ways in which this administration has gleefully gutted our Medicare and Medicaid infrastructure, gutting our social safety and our healthcare systems, and really transferring those dollars that have been intended to support sexual and reproductive health care for many of our working and low-income Americans, and transferring that wealth to billionaires. So it is just, again, I know people are struggling a lot with just the impacts and policies of this president, but I think the cruelty is also in the playing on people's heartstrings, knowing where they were on various journeys as it relates to everything from IVF and abortion to access to contraception, and then completely, doing an about face and letting his cronies really drive anti-reproductive freedom strategies and policies.
It's cruel, that bait and switch as you described. Now, at Planned Parenthood, how have you all been fighting for and defending reproductive freedom? As we talked about, it's under attack in the Trump era. So how have you all been focused on fighting that during these eight months he's been in office?
I know, 202 days to be exact.
I love it. You would know. I love that. Perfect.
Look, we have not taken our foot off the gas for one moment since Trump took office. I think many of these attacks have had a direct impact on the bodies and the lives and the futures of patients that Planned Parenthood health centers serve every single day. We know that the big bad betrayal of a law now includes a provision that, quote, defunds Planned Parenthood. And look, I want to be clear, there's not a line item in the budget. There's never been a line item in the budget that is a Planned Parenthood line item. It's always been Planned Parenthood providing services to patients and then getting reimbursed like any other provider in the healthcare system for those services provided. But what they did in this defund provision is essentially create a backdoor abortion ban that's going to have far-ranging consequences. If our fight against the administration does not prevail, could impact healthcare for 1.1 million Americans that come to Planned Parenthood for healthcare. So our stance is we're going to keep fighting. We took the administration to court. And we are, standing up to the administration and fighting while we're watching so many other industries and, significant iconic industries really capitulate. And we see no place and no room for freedom to capitulate in the fight for freedom or the fight for our democracy. So we're going to keep, that's going to be our posture as we move forward.
Phenomenal. So what can people do in their communities if they're watching this, their states, to support reproductive healthcare access?
I just going back to the Dobbs decision, we're now 3 years into living in, the 8 months of this presidency, but also the 3 years of no longer having full access to control over our own bodies. And the first thing that often happens when democracies descend into authoritarianism is they cut off reproductive rights. And the reason they do that is because it's the easiest way to control half of the population. And knowing that we are in that moment, both from Donald Trump's Supreme Court decision on Dobbs overturning Roe to the various things that I named that he is doing, we are really focusing on a few things. One, helping people understand that while we are locked out of structural power in a lot of ways, obviously in Congress and many state houses, places where we know that Americans believe and support reproductive freedom widely, and yet their lawmakers have gerrymandered themselves into power that mean that they can take votes and they can enact policies that are out of where their constituents are and not have any accountability for it. So we're really trying to help people understand why it is that they can't have the things that they want in the communities and states in which they live, and putting the clear focus and responsibility on those lawmakers for not listening to their constituents and using anti-democratic mechanisms to further lock them out of power. We are also being very intentional about understanding just, again, how authoritarian, not democracy, but an authoritarian kind of dissent, what that means. It means that there is power on the local level. We believe that all politics is local. And so we have to work state by state to ensure that, we are strengthening communities to fight back against this horrible regime. And then look, we're also making sure that we are fighting back using every tool at our disposal. We have seen victories over the last few years. We have secured critical abortion rights protections at the state level. We have an opportunity to build on them. We have seen attacks such as Planned Parenthood getting defunded, and we're litigating that. And I think we do have a good sense of what's coming next. We've seen it written up in the Project 2025 playbook, and they're staying true to that text. And so, we are going to be prepared to fight those attacks on mifepristone to ensure that we're going to bring public awareness to all of our friends and neighbors and families. And, sharing our stories is a really powerful antidote to these horrible policies that are being enacted, so that people are primed, at every opportunity when they have to make a choice on who is going to best represent them, that they have all of that information at their ready, so they can make the best informed decision to fight for reproductive freedom.
That's fantastic. I learned so much from you. I thought I knew so much about this topic, and I learned more from you today. Thank you so much, President Alexis McGill Johnson, for joining us today. Your fight, the fight that Planned Parenthood is putting up during these 8 months, 202 days of the Donald Trump administration, is something that we in the Democratic Party are going to continue to do as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that does it for this episode of the Daily Blueprint. We're here every weekday at 10 a.m. Eastern on the DNC's YouTube page. Until tomorrow.